Hi, Glenn here, the People's Carpenter, and I have made a chair. I've made a chair to go with the dining table that I made recently for my grandson. It is a chair based on what's called the Leopold bench, and I think it turned out rather well. Would you like to watch a video about how it was done? If so, keep watching. If you're not subscribed, but you do find this kind of content interesting, please consider subscribing and give me a like. That really helps me in the algorithm. Enjoy. So, what I have here is well, they seem a bit thick to be panels, but I suppose they are panels. They're pieces of Rimu that used to be bits of other things, very recycled. There's a big old staple and some bits still stuck onto it. And these three pieces of recycled Rimu are going to become a chair for my grandson, specifically a variation of what's called a Leopold bench. Aldo Leopold, about whom I don't know very much, I think he was best known as a conservationist, and in the early 20th century he designed a bench where he would sit and watch birds. The feathered variety, I assume. And I'm not going to be making a bench. This is why what I'm making is just a variation. It'll be like a narrow version of his bench, and much smaller generally because it's for a small person. So let's start by making these boards into something usable. This is my cheap chisel that I use for such rough jobs. Now, will I want to fix that or just cut it off? Either one would be effective enough, I think. But I will give myself more options if I fix it. So that's what I'll do. It doesn't look too dirty in there because this crack has been held shut by the tension. So I'll just prise it open, get some glue in there, and then clamp it up. I'll come back to this task tomorrow. Some usable boards here now. Obviously during the process I will be removing parts of them. This is more than I need for the legs at least. The more I look at these pieces, the more I question whether or not they are all rimu. It's got to be oak, surely, right? And even this, viewers at home might not be familiar with New Zealand timber, but some of that pattern and the redness in there says to me that this just looks like tōtara, which is another New Zealand native species. This certainly looks like rimu. I've seen pieces of rimu that colour before. Ultimately it doesn't matter, it all looks very nice and I'm going to use it anyway. So I should just stop going down that rabbit hole and get to work. Now all the leg pieces, all of these, I want to be all the same width for aesthetic purposes and as wide as possible, which means they're all going to be as wide as the narrowest piece, which I think is going to be these. That's just over 180 millimeters, and 180 millimeters is fine with me. Yeah, so these are all going to be 180 mils. Yeah, plenty of space, plenty of width in those to do that. It does mean that one of the pieces is going to be made up of more than one board, but I can live with that. Now here is where a table saw with a rip blade would be really handy, but I do have other options. I might use my track saw. Now I'll hang on to this larger offcut. I have a use for it later in this project. Right, as you will have seen in the pictures of a Leopold bench, the legs are at an angle. And what angle? Well, a 30-degree angle. Now, there are various ways of measuring angles, but a really useful and quick way is by using a speed square, also known as a rafter square. I've got two of these. This one is actually from Timu, and it's great because it's a big chunky one with big numbers for old eyes like mine. Now, I've decided that's going to be the end of my board because there are some splits there. Along this edge, this one even tells you what they are. It says degrees, and the way that this works is if you turn it until 5 is aligned with the edge of the board, then you've just turned this 5 degrees. And it's really simple. So I'm going to turn this all the way to the 30 line. And then what's happened here is I've just turned 30 degrees. So that will give me my cut. Now, the truth is, measuring it this way is just a guide. Ultimately, I'm going to use the angle on my miter saw where it says 30. My miter saw isn't perfect. It might be like 29.5, might be 30.5. Doesn't matter, it's going to be close enough. So I've adjusted my miter saw to the 30-degree mark. I'm going to have to make. So this is, imagine this is the top of the seat, angling down to the bottom. I'm going to put a back on the seat, but if I just put the back there, then whoever sits here will be leaning back at 30 degrees, which I suppose you could do, but I don't want to do that. So if I wanted to have them sitting upright, I would use the 60-degree marker here. I will let them relax a little bit. So we'll go to 65. Is that far enough? Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. And I'm going to use the... I don't normally think in inches, but I'm going to use this to tell myself there's going to be a 10-inch flat section on the back here. Is that okay? Yeah, I suppose that's okay. No, there wasn't a way to safely do that on my miter saw, so I will do it on the bandsaw, and then I'll have to plane those lines nice and straight. Put a chamfer on the outside edge. I'll put a chamfer on the inside edge as well, but not on the part where the two legs overlap, so I'll ascertain that shortly. Okay, so this is going to be the right leg. I'm now looking at the inside face of it. I've chamfered the outside face. And this is going to be the small right leg. So this will be the inside face. So I'll chamfer this. Then I'm going to want to chamfer the parts that do not overlap, so I'll mark those. Now, this doesn't have to be exact, but more or less I'm just going to mark where these legs will overlap, so that I'm only chamfering the parts that I should. Okay, so I won't chamfer those bits, they will be part of the glue join, but I will chamfer these bits, which will be exposed. That looks about right. Using a board that I know that I've machined nice and straight, treat that as the floor, so that I've got both these pieces sitting where they should. I wanted to just glue it, but screwing would be a little better for getting the alignment right while things dry. Now, I don't have any of those drill bits that have the countersink built onto them, which would be handy. Now, because I am screwing, I won't need a whole lot of glue. I will put a clamp on there just to ensure a good bond. Now things are starting to look a little bit more coherent. Obviously the seat will be wider than that. Okay, time to make the seat and the back. And I'm going to make them both from this piece of Rimu. It's laminated, there are two pieces here, but that's okay, it still looks nice. The seat is going to be 35 centimeters wide or thereabouts. The back will need to be slightly wider because it will cover the ends of the two sides. So that will be 39. Okay, so the seat piece I'm going to do very little with. All I'll do is round over these edges, give it a sand, and then it's basically done. Okay, so how am I going to design this back? Well, it's really simple. I don't have a whole lot of material to work with. And this is just going to be rounded. And then there's going to be a shape that I'm going to make in the middle part. Now, I don't have any nice templates for a round of exactly that size. So I'm just going to improvise by using my ruler to create the curve. And to hold the ruler in place, I've just got some little panel pins. Now all I'll do, hopefully this doesn't create too much tension so that it flicks those pins out. Well, that should be about right. Now is that going to be perfect? Maybe not, but it's a better curve than I could freehand, I think. It's a guide anyway. Now I shall cut that with my band saw and then sand it smooth, and that'll be the shape of the top. Now, there is a slight defect in the wood there. I hadn't intended this decorative feature just to remove that defect, but happily, it will. And there we go. Made it. Okay, I've pre-drilled for the screws, or at least on the seat and on the back piece, so I'll have to do the pre-drilling into the legs as well. I just noticed I already knew these were here. These nice recycled features, old nail holes. Could leave them there, but do I want to? I've decided I won't leave them there. So I didn't show you the plug cutting process. I'll do that another time. I cut some plugs out of the same piece of wood, the offcut. So these are the same thickness as this board. So I will just drill those out and plug them up. I really wanted to make sure I hammered it flat because it's exactly the same thickness as the board. My regular video camera has a flat battery, but I want to get this done this evening, so I'll do it now. Here's the underside of the seat, and when I was ripping these boards to the right width, I set this piece aside and said that I would use it. I'm going to cut a piece off and put a brace there. Now, this Remu is really strong and quite hard. It's not that thin and it's not that long, so is this redundant? Don't know, but it's better to over-engineer than under-engineer. So I'm going to cut a piece off, glue it on the underside, then we'll be ready to assemble. Can't make it full width, of course, because the seat has to sit on the legs, so this has to be the full width minus twice the width of the leg, and I've just made a mark there. You know when a project gets to the point where you think, okay, I've done most of the fun stuff, now I just want to finish it? Well, I'm there. So let's get this finished. Let's start to assemble things. Okay, so a little bit of glue and just 2 screws. Between those 2 things I think we'll be okay. As always with any kind of hard wood, I have pre-drilled, and I'm recessing the screws, and I will hide them with plugs. Okay, now it is sunk sufficiently below the surface that I will get a plug in there on top of it. Right, okay. We have a chair. This is the last of the screw holes to plug. I figured you wouldn't want to see me do all of them. Right. Let the glue dry, trim those, sand, varnish. So I'm just giving this whole surface one final sand. As I indicated earlier, I'm giving the inside edges a rub with some sandpaper. In this case, just some 240 grit sandpaper. Now that is purely, well, partly aesthetic, but also for comfort, so that the edge doesn't feel as sharp. And that'll do. You don't have to do much. However, I chamfered the outside bottom edge of the leg, and I will do so as well, just gently here. The reason for that is if this thing gets dragged along a hard surface, the fibres of wood can break out and chip off, and chamfering the edge just helps to prevent that. Like so. It doesn't have to be a large chamfer, that will help. Danish oil is one of my favourite wood finishes, partly because it's really simple to use, and I may have discussed it briefly before, but what is Danish oil? Well, it depends on the brand, because every brand has a slightly different cocktail. Minimally, it will contain some type of commonly used wood oil that will be either tung oil or linseed oil, probably. And then, well, often it also contains polyurethane, which makes it a little bit tougher than just an oil finish. But yeah, I really like it. It's very simple to apply. It isn't a super traditional finish because because of when it was made. It is quite modern. It came out during the 20th century. Mid-20th century, I believe, but it has a really traditional look to it because it looks like, I guess it looks like an oil finish, but it does just provide a little bit more protection than an oil finish, and I like it. I like it a lot. I wouldn't have used it on the tabletop because that's going to see quite a bit of wear, but the seat perhaps not so much. So I'm applying the first coat, and I'll probably apply a second as well. I would normally just use it straight out of the can, but I ruined this batch. There wasn't all that much left, but I obviously didn't quite seal the lid, and so now there was a skin on top and bits of solid in it. So I poured it into this container, and I'm just avoiding the chunks, and it's still good other than that. But this will be the last time it can be used. I've applied the second coat now, and I'm wiping off excess, but we're done. We are done. Very happy with the result. It looks kind of like what I thought it would, which is good, I suppose. And I will, after wiping off the excess, I'll give it a few days to fully dry and do some curing, and then I shall. Well, I'll put them to use, won't I? Which is the whole point of this. My grandson will be sitting on this chair. Mr. Leopold, I have to say, I like your bench. I didn't really make a bench, but obviously this is inspired by the Leopold bench. Quite a simple project to make. Part of the appeal is that you don't have to worry about any mortising or tenon-ing. Mortises or tenons. That makes it somewhat simpler. Yeah, it's elegant, it looks nice, and I'm finished. I do have a small project coming up. Small project, but it's the kind of thing everyone seems to want to make when they get into woodworking. You'll see about that soon, so come back and I'll have something for you. Until then.